I leaned back against the sturdy trunk of a takamaka tree, feeling the warm sand beneath my feet. The soft hum of the Indian Ocean filled the air, and the salty breeze carried the sweet scent of seaweed and frangipani. Curious Island had become more than just a remote dot in the Seychelles. It had become home. I took a deep breath, letting the tranquility of my day wash over me. The past year felt like a whirlwind. Leaving behind the brown moors of Scotland to join a conservation team here had been the adventure of a lifetime. I smiled to myself, remembering the first day when I arrived, pale and jet-lagged, blinking at the blindingly white beaches and impossibly blue waters. It was like stepping into a dream. At first, the work had been tough. Early mornings trekking through dense mangroves, knee-deep in mud, planting saplings that would one day shield the coastline. Afternoons spent under the blazing sun counting Aldabragine tortoises, tracking birds and keeping eye on the rare Coco de Mer palms. I'd come here with a love of nature, but nothing could have prepared me for the raw, untamed beauty of Curious or the deep connection I'd feel with this place. I reached for my water bottle and let my gaze wander over the horizon, where turquoise waves lazily lapped at the shore. In the distance, I could just make out the outline of Prowlin Island, where the other interns were probably enjoying their day off. But I wanted to stay here, alone with my thoughts and the island that had become my sanctuary. While lost in thought, my ears pricked to the sound of a party yacht not too far from the island. This annoyed me to no end, as the local government strictly prohibited these activities around conservation areas to avoid disturbing the wildlife. But before I could shout over to them, some members of my team blared on their megaphones to help them leave the space, or be reported to the authorities. The no-doubtably entitled rich kids on the yacht wanted to ignore them, but a passing-by Coast Guard vessel seemed to speed up their decision-making. Now I was able to get back to relaxing. I thought of the friendships I'd made, other interns from all around the world, bonded by our shared mission and passion for the environment. We'd spent so many evenings around campfires, swapping stories and laughter under the star-filled skies, the sound of waves crashing in the background. Those moments had made this place feel like home, more than I'd ever imagined. A small crab scuttled across the sand in front of me, its tiny legs moving with determined speed. I chuckled, watching it disappear into a crevice between two rocks. The island's wildlife had become part of the rhythm of my life here. Each creature a reminder of the delicate balance we're all trying to protect. With climate change and rising sea levels, these have never been more important times to help look after wildlife. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting everything in a warm golden glow, I let out a contented sigh. My time here on Curious had changed me in ways I hadn't expected. The simplicity of life here, the deep connection to nature, and the friendship I'd forged had filled a void that I didn't even know existed. Tomorrow I'd be back at it, knee-deep in mud, battling the elements to plant the next generation of mangroves. But today, I allowed myself to simply be, to enjoy the peace that Curious had given me, to be grateful for the year that had transformed me, and to look forward to whatever adventures I still had waiting for me here. As I sat there, savouring the stillness of the evening, a sudden flash of light caught my eye. I squinted, focusing on the horizon where the ocean met the sky. There it was again, a bright, flickering light, just a few miles out to sea. My first thought was lightning, but the sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. The light blinked a few more times, almost in a pattern, before disappearing. I frowned, feeling a knot of unease forming in my stomach. It could be anything. a reflection, some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. But another part of me whispered that it might be someone in trouble. Curious was surrounded by treacherous reefs, and more than a few boats had found themselves caught on those sharp rocks. Maybe someone out there was trying to signal for help. I stood up, brushing the sand from my shorts, and headed for the small boat we kept moored in the island's edge. Grabbing a paddle and a torch, I told myself it was probably nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to check it out. Better safe than sorry, right? Pushing the boat into the shallow water, I hopped in and started rowing. The familiar resistance of the ocean against the paddle felt oddly comforting as I made my way towards the spot where I'd seen the light. The water here was shallow and calm, so clear I could see straight through to the bottom. Schools of fish darted between the coral below, vibrant bursts of colour against the sandy seabed. The reef was alive with movement. Stingrays gliding gracefully over the sand, small sharks weaving through the coral, and sea turtles grazing on sea grass. But as I rowed, I couldn't help but notice the patches of bleached coral, pale and lifeless amidst the vibrant underwater world. It was a sight that always hit me hard. No matter how much work we did, no matter how many mangroves we planted or surveys we conducted, the reality of climate change was always there, lurking beneath the surface. I pushed those thoughts aside as I got closer to the spot where I'd seen the light. The sun had dipped lower now, casting long shadows across the water. I paused for a moment, listening to the gentle lap of waves against the boat, the creaking of the oars. Everything seemed so peaceful. Yet the memory of flashing light kept my senses on high alert. As I rowed further out, the island behind me slowly shrank, replaced by the endless expanse of ocean. The wind picked up slightly, and I felt a chill despite the warm air. I scanned the horizon for any sign of a boat, wreckage, or another flash of light. Nothing. I almost turned back, ready to write it off as a trick of the light, when something far out of the water caught my eye. A glint, just barely visible in the fading light of dusk. My grip tightened on the paddle as I steered the boat in that direction, curiosity and concern swirling together as I ventured deeper into the unknown. As I drew nearer to the spot where I'd seen the flash, the gentle rhythm of the boat's motion was interrupted by an unexpected sight. A bull shark, that sleek body cutting through the water with alarming speed. It swam away from me, its dark, menacing silhouette disappearing into the distance, as if it were fleeing from something. The urgency in its movement made my skin prickle with unease. Confusion welled up inside me. I was about to push closer when the light flashed again, more intensely this time. I squinted, my heart racing as the flash revealed something utterly impossible. A crackling circle, about 4 meters across, hung in the air above the water. The edges of the circle shimmered with an electric blue light, creating a strange pulsating effect. Through that circle, I saw a scene that defied all logic. It was a dense mangrove forest, completely out of place in the middle of the ocean. The mangroves looked vibrant and healthy, their roots sprawling like intricate networks beneath the surface. Strange birds flitted among the branches. Somehow, even at a distance, I could tell they were very unlike any species I'd ever seen. They had colours that seemed too vivid, almost unnatural. And their wings weren't made up of feathers, but skin. Just as quickly as it appeared, the circle closed, the crackling light fading away and the ocean returned to its usual calm. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just witnessed. A dense mangrove in the middle of the ocean. Strange birds. It was beyond my understanding. and before I could gather my thoughts, a new, far more immediate concern surfaced. From the depths of the water, a large, shadowy figure emerged. My heart skipped a beat as I saw it break the surface. Something with a crocodilian appearance, easily over 7 meters long. Its scales glistened in the fading light, and its massive jaws, lined with rows of sharp teeth, snapped shut with an audible click. The beast's eyes were like cold, dark orbs, fixated on me with an unnerving intensity. I froze, my mind racing through a dozen thoughts at once. The creature moved with surprising speed for its size, and its sheer presence was enough to make me feel small and vulnerable. My first instinct was to retreat, but the boat was already in motion, drifting slowly away from the creature. I fumbled for the paddle, trying to control my breathing and stay calm as possible. As the beast's attention seemed to shift, it glided gracefully back into the depths, leaving only ripples on the surface. My hand shook as I looked around, trying to piece together what I'd just seen. The strange electric circle, the mangroves, and the massive creature. It all felt like a fragment of some wild, impossible dream. My only thought was to get back to the island, to share what I'd seen and try make sense of it all. I turned the boat, my mind still spinning, and began paddling back toward the safety of the shore, each stroke feeling heavier as I fought to steady my nerves. The sun was setting fast, casting long shadows over the water, and the tranquil evening now felt eerily foreboding. By the time I managed to get back to shore, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting an orange and pink glow over the island. My heart was still racing from the encounter, and the eerie sight of the massive crocodile thing was etched into my mind. I barely noticed the darkness creeping in as I stumbled back to the base, my nerves frayed and my thoughts scattered. The island was quieter than usual as I made my way to my bunk. My colleagues gathered around the campfire chatting and unwinding from their own day. I decided not to stop to talk or explain what I'd seen. I simply nodded to a few of them before retreating to my room. Exhaustion hit me like a wave, and I fell into a restless sleep almost immediately, hoping that the day's events were nothing more than a vivid dream. But sleep didn't come easy. In the middle of the night, a loud, jarring sound pulled me from my dreams. I groggily sat up, trying my best to make sense of the noise. It was the party yacht, blaring music far too loud for the serene night. The bass thumped relentlessly, and the laughter and shouting of the revelers carried across the water. The noise was piercing, cutting through the tranquil calm of the island and disturbing the seabirds. I could almost feel the anxiety of the animals as they scattered, disturbed from their natural rhythms. I sighed and threw on my clothes and rushed out of the room, joining my colleagues who were already assembling at the edge of the beach. The party yacht was a blight on the night, a garish silhouette illuminated by its own flashing lights, creating a stark contrast against the dark sky. "All right, we need to get them off the water," one of the senior interns said, holding up a megaphone. The plan was simple but urgent. Use the megaphone to give them a warning, and if necessary, we'd have to take the boat over to enforce it. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed into one of the small boats with a couple of my colleagues. The water was eerily calm as we rowed towards the yacht, the once peaceful sea now feeling unnaturally hostile under the circumstances. The blaring music grew louder, and the flickering lights on the yacht seemed to dance across the waves, adding to the disorienting atmosphere. As we drew closer, one of the senior interns raised the megaphone and shouted through it.
"This is a conservation area. Please turn down the music and move away from the island immediately."
The sound of the megaphone cut through the music, but it took a few seconds before anyone on the yacht seemed to notice. The revelers finally looked over, their expressions a mix of surprise and irritation. We could see them huddling together, some pointing at us and others arguing over what to do. The boat continued to approach, and I felt the tension in the air rise. I glanced back at the island, hoping that the wildlife was finding some semblance of peace away from the disturbance. The yacht's music was lowered, but it wasn't turned off entirely. The boat's engines roared as the yacht slowly began to move away, albeit reluctantly. We had begun to start moving back to shore, when suddenly the once festive atmosphere had turned chaotic. The music was replaced by the screams and confusion of the partygoers. Without thinking, we whipped the boat around, aiming our flashlights towards the boat, where we saw the yacht being violently shaken. It was the creature, the same massive crocodilian beast I'd seen earlier. It had surfaced again, its enormous bulk crashing into the yacht, causing it to list dangerously. I shouted to my colleagues who were already rushing towards the scene. As we paddled closer, I could see the yacht's partygoers were in full panic. Some were trying to fend off the creature with whatever they could find, throwing things into the water at it, while others were scrambling to escape. A sudden, powerful lurch threw us off balance. I barely had time to react before the yacht tipped sideways and the beast's massive jaws snapped shut on the boat's hull. The yacht was now partially submerged, and with a horrifying crack, the boat was overturned, sending it careening into us and sending everyone crashing into the water. I plunged into the cool sea, my flashlight slipping from my grip and vanishing into the darkness below. Around me, chaos reigned. Flailing arms, panicked shouts, and the terrifying splash of the creature moving through the water. The yacht was now a wreck, partially sunk with debris scattered everywhere. I kicked and thrashed trying to stay afloat and get away from it, which seemed to be attacking anything in its path. I spotted a piece of driftwood and grabbed it, clinging to it for support. As I paddled away from the wreckage, I glanced around, trying to locate my colleagues. The water was filled with survivors, some clinging to floating debris, others trying to swim to safety. The roar of the creature echoed around us, growing fainter as it moved away from the yacht. With the immediate threat seeming to recede for now, I turned my attention to the survivors. I saw a few familiar faces from the base, their expressions pale with fear. I managed to gather them together, helping each other onto any floating debris we could find. I looked back at the wreckage of the yacht, now a dark silhouette against the starry sky. It took a lot of effort, but we managed to pull ourselves ashore, shivering from the cold and adrenaline. I looked back at the wreckage of the yacht. The scene was a nightmare brought to life. Some of the survivors were still struggling in the water, but most managed to cling to pieces of floating debris or swim to shore. The shrieks of those who were dragged under and the terrifying splashes of the creature were seared into my mind. A few of the people who had fallen into the water were nowhere to be seen, and the silence that followed the creature's attack was punctuated only by the sounds of the survivors gasping for breath and the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. We huddled together on the beach, our eyes fixed on the scene unfolding in the water. It had returned. The massive reptile was circling the wreckage, its enormous form cutting through the waves with unsettling grace. Its jaws opened wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth as it continued to patrol the area. Occasionally, it would dive beneath the surface, re-emerging a short distance away, sometimes with a screeching person in its mouth. Each movement a reminder of its terrifying power. We watched in horror as it returned to the wreckage again and again, seeming to feed off the chaos it had created. The yacht was barely recognizable now, a mangled mess of metal and splintered wood, drifting listlessly. Every now and then the creature would surface, its eyes scanning the area with an eerie predatory focus. By the time the first lights of approaching boats appeared on the horizon, signalling the arrival of the authorities, the creature had begun to lose interest. It made one final menacing pass around the wreckage before turning and heading out into deeper waters. Its form gradually disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a wake of turmoil and destruction. The Coast Guard arrived, their boats cutting through the waves with a sense of urgency. Flashing lights and the hum of the engines filled the air, providing a stark contrast to the haunting silence that had settled over the survivors. Rescue workers began to pull people from the water that managed to outwit the creature and hide. I watched as they moved with practiced efficiency, their faces grim but focused. Despite the presence of the authorities, the island felt eerily silent. The once vibrant nightlife of the party yacht was replaced by the somber reality of the aftermath. People were being accounted for, treated for injuries, and comforted. The reality of the night's events began to sink in. The loss, the terror, and the unknown that lay beneath the surface of the sea. If I hadn't been so dismissive of what I'd seen and told someone, could this have been avoided? Probably not. I probably would have been carted off to the hospital, or sent home to Scotland. But I can't help but blame myself, and I don't know if I can stay here, knowing that that thing is under the waves, waiting for its next meal.